Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to a chapter-by-chapter read-through that I'm doing of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I started with the Two Towers, and then moved on to the Return of the King. Now we've come back around to the Fellowship of the Ring. And we have a relatively slow beginning, although this reread is really opening my eyes more so every time I reread this, to the fact that there's a lot going on. Even though this is fairly slow compared to the epic doings that are coming in the middle part of this book and on, still quite a bit going on. Mainly hovering around our quartet of heroes, four hobbits, Sam, Frodo, Merry, and Pippin, who are making their way out of their home of the Shire while bearing the One Ring, the ruling ring created by the Dark Lord Sauron an age ago. The most dangerous thing in Middle-earth that has come to light. It has been sitting on Frodo and for him Bilbo's mantelpiece in the Shire for almost a century. And now that Gandalf, the wizard, knows what it is, something must be done with it. It can't stay in the Shire. The Dark Lord's servants know the name of the Shire. They know what hobbits are at long last. They even know the name of Baggins. So Frodo knows that if he stays in the Shire, he endangers the whole place. And also assures his capture. So he goes on the road. Gandalf assures him, I have to leave. I have things to look into, but I will rejoin you. And we will be on the road together. But he has not made true with that. He has missed his appointment. They haven't seen him since then. They've just kept going. They met a wandering company of elves. They met a strange creature called Tom Bombadil, who saved them a couple of times. And Bombadil has given them ponies and ridden them out of the domain that he has complete control over. It's not a kingdom, doesn't have a fence or a yard or anything, but within certain bounds, Tom is master. And outside of those bounds, he has no interest in going. So he puts them back on the road and says, you should go to Bree, to the Inn of the Prancing Pony. Where I think it's assumed by all and sundry that at the very least, that's where Gandalf will meet them. Even though he's been late, he'll be there and maybe full of apologies. But when they get to Bree, Bree is a big, prosperous human settlement. But it's not human only. Dwarfs come through all the time on their way to and from their own trading missions. There are all kinds of different humans there. And the Inn of the Prancing Pony is hospitable to all types. They actually have rooms that are specifically made for hobbits. On the first floor, round windows, probably round doors. And the innkeeper, Barleyman, is happy to see these hobbits. He's happy to welcome them. And we'll get their rooms ready. In the meantime, they can have food and drink in the common room with a whole crowd of people. Lots and lots of humans, lots and lots of big people. Also some dwarfs are in the room. And the hobbits do. Merry and Pippin are a lot... they're taking things a lot less seriously, you get the impression, than Sam and Frodo are. But even Sam is cheered by the mention of fresh beer and nice sleeping arrangements and all that sort of thing. And they become boisterous, telling stories from the road, hearing stories from the road. But the whole time, Frodo notices a stranger in the shadows of a corner. He's got a deep hood over his face, despite the warmth of the room. And he seems weather-beaten, long, weather-beaten boots. And Frodo doesn't quite know what to make of him. And when the man bids him come over to the table, Frodo goes. He has misgivings. He is traveling under pseudonym, Mr. Underhill. The man seems to speak with extra import. He's not just casually inviting Frodo over to his table. Seems to know a lot about things that almost nobody knows anything about at all. And he points out to Frodo, your young friends there are starting to talk a little too freely of your adventures on the road. Frodo starts to listen and hears to his horror that the stranger is right. That the stranger goes by the name of Strider, although that's no name for a man, as we hear later on. Frodo realizes that Strider is right. The other hobbits are right on the verge of simply mentioning the ring. they're right on the verge of mentioning dark riders or an epic adventure. That would be disastrous. They want to be incognito. So Frodo goes over to sort of take control of the narrative, I guess, and ends up dancing on tables and singing a long Hobbit song. We get a lot of verse of what that song is. Tolkien can almost never resist this sort of thing. So we get a whole page of verse, and then almost a whole page of, again, a verse. And we're told that even that is not all of what Frodo's saying. And Frodo gets more and more rowdy, dancing on a tabletop for the amusement of everybody in the room, and then falls. He slips off the table and falls in a clatter of earthenware and tankards and boards and whatnot, and vanishes. Because in the midst of his excitement, he has somehow put on the ring, which causes its wearers to turn invisible, except for Tom Bombadil. The whole crowd is struck dumb. They immediately suspect magic. They don't know what's going on here. They know for sure that Frodo did not get lost in the hubbub. He vanished. Frodo knows this, but there's not much he can do about it. He crawls back over to the wall next to Strider, takes the ring off, and reappears. Strider upbraids him and says, you made things even worse than your friends were doing. What on earth were you thinking? And it's a tense moment. No one really wants to stay anymore. The people, the humans and the dwarves, sort of file out, giving Frodo dirty looks. Barliman takes it in his stride. He's a natural innkeeper, so he's not about to throw out good business. But he says, I'd appreciate it if there'd be no more ruckus like that. Frodo is all apologetic, and I assume the other hobbits are too, and Strider invites himself to a private meeting with them. Says it'd be much to their advantage to hear what he has to say, and calls him by his right name, Baggins. So Frodo feels obliged to listen to this man, to go out of the common room up to their rooms and listen to him. But that's where the chapter ends. The chapter ends with them going off. So all of this chapter really is the hobbits making merry in a common room at an inn, unwisely, while Strider watches. Strider could have been introduced in some other way, and the element that would make sense of this chapter seems studiously missing. Or so under stress that you could easily read this chapter without thinking about it at all. And I wonder sometimes if the reason for that, of course I consider that to be entirely conscious. Tolkien was a master as a writer, so if he does something, he has a reason for it. He thought long and hard about it. I sometimes wonder if the reason why the element that I'm talking about, which is alcohol, is not explicitly harped on in a chapter that seems to be explicable only because our hobbits are drunk. And is it that Tolkien was making that decision because in the Fellowship of the Ring, he is very gradually transitioning the whole story from the children's story that it was in The Hobbit to an adult story that it will be later on. I mean, earlier on, we have lots and lots of stuff about hobbits and holes, lots and lots of pratfalls and local humor. We have a talking fox straight out of a children's fable. We don't get anything like that later on in Lord of the Rings. And maybe in these early chapters, Tolkien is trying to transition his story from the one to the other. And so maybe that's the reason in this chapter that he doesn't mention alcohol, but I can't think of another reason. This chapter's always bugged me. I can't think of a reason why the hobbits they know they're being followed. They have been terrified on this trip by the importance of what's going on. They've had elves and Tom Bombadil tell them that this is a very serious thing and that you are in grave danger. It doesn't strike me that unaided by any kind of chemical, they would just forget that the minute they get to an inn. I can't help but think that that's the subtext of this chapter, which is that at least Merry and Pippin and maybe Sam are drunk, and that Frodo is acting drunk. We're told that he had drinks pressed on him, but we're not told how many or whether or not he actually drank them. Either way, as you can tell from my tone, this is, I think, another bit of a misfire of a chapter. I would be willing to bet that it owes its ultimate origin to Tolkien wanting to use that poetry. I just built a chapter around it. That he'd come up with a tavern song and didn't want to let it go from the final draft of the book. I'd be willing to bet that. I don't know if any of Tolkien's innumerable letters actually bear that out. There's a whole new collection of Tolkien's letters coming out later this year. Maybe I'll see if I get an answer there. But either way, you easily picture that this could be done a little bit more effectively. That a large part of the Hobbit's meeting Strider and him being a mysterious figure with a cloak over his head and seeming a little bit threatening. The whole point of that, I think, is for them to learn to trust him, but not trust him at first. And if you want to preserve that point in your story, you could have done that in I think, a little bit less mystifying way. Strider could he could have approached the hobbits right away and said, I think we should talk in private. And dropping the name of Baggins would probably have got him that private talk without all of this dancing and capering, without anything like that. And I don't mean that, I won't go on and on, but if you're dancing and capering on a table and you fall, you don't accidentally put on a ring while you're falling. I, I know we're told in this chapter that once again the ring is urging Frodo to put it on. That usually signals that there is a servant of the Dark Lord nearby who will know when the ring is on, who will know that there's trouble. The ring wants to get back to Sauron. It wants to trick anyone who uses it to getting it closer and closer to Mordor. Some of that doubt is lurking over this chapter. Things start to pick up properly in the next chapter, so we'll reconvene for then, and I'll have less of my problem face on. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.